Do you think the world is cruel today? Imagine being judged by a speck of dust on the ground. In 1200 BC, your dignity didn't depend on facts, but on the color of water. Her crime? None recorded. No witnesses. No evidence of wrongdoing. Only her husband's statement. In the Sinai Desert, in 1400 BC, a man's jealous declaration triggered a legal and religious process that would determine the fate of an Israelite woman. You stand before the tent of meeting. The silence of the crowd is broken only by the sound of the priest scraping the ground to gather the dust that you will be forced to swallow. Welcome to the most terrifying day in an Israeli woman's life. Prepare yourself, because the priest has just pronounced your name, and the bitter water ritual is about to begin. Imagine the sweltering heat of the Sinai Desert. The midday sun is not just a light, it's a weight crushing the shoulders of the thousands of people camped around the tent of meeting. But the heat you feel now, rising up your neck, doesn't come from the sun. It comes from your husband's hand, gripping your wrist with a firmness that guides you toward the tabernacle. He walks ahead of you, gazing at the tent of meeting, the place where, according to Israelite tradition, the presence of God dwells, and what you read in his posture is the determination of someone about to exercise a legal right granted to him by the law of Moses. You are being led through the tents. The noise of the camp, the sound of children playing, and the smell of cooking meals all suddenly seem distant, as if you were entering a bubble of isolation. People stop what they are doing. They observe. They talk in hushed voices. In that instant, you have become part of a public process prescribed by Israelite law, the ritual of Sotah, the law concerning a woman suspected of infidelity, described in detail in chapter 5 of the Book of Numbers. What distinguishes this moment is the absence of material evidence. There was no flagrant crime under the moonlight. There was no lover found in hiding. There wasn't even an eyewitness who could come before the council of elders to testify. According to the scriptures in Numbers 5, it is sufficient that the spirit of jealousy dominates the man. That is, that he develops an intense suspicion regarding his wife's conduct, for the law to grant him the right to present her before the priest. The procedure does not require prior proof of guilt. It is the very mechanism created to determine guilt or innocence in cases where there are no human witnesses. You try to speak, try to narrate the events of your routine, to explain that the conversation at the well was only about the price of grain, or that the look he misinterpreted was just a common occurrence. But in the theocratic system of 1400 BC, the husband's formal declaration is the trigger that sets the tabernacle's machinery in motion. He takes you to the priest within the limits of what the law stipulates, and you will be subjected to the only procedure that society recognizes as capable of resolving a domestic dispute where there is no evidence, public judgment before God. As you approach the courtyard of the tabernacle, you notice your husband carrying something in his hands, a barley offering. But it is no ordinary offering of gratitude or religious celebration. There is no oil on it, nor incense to perfume the air. According to the text of Numbers 5, it is called a grain offering of remembrance, an offering that, in the Scripture's own terms, brings iniquity to remembrance. The smell of the raw barley is dry and dense, a sign of the specific nature of what is about to happen. The legal context of the time presents a distinction in legal procedures between men and women. If a man was accused of infidelity, the rules followed different paths and generally required an act of adultery with a married woman in the act for a formal process to begin. For a married woman, the husband's declaration of suspicion was sufficient to trigger the ritual. You look at the face of the approaching priest. He is about to conduct a ritualistic procedure that, according to Israelite faith, would place the matter directly in God's hands. In this first stage of the ritual, the impact is immediate, the loss of privacy. It's knowing that the procedure will be conducted in front of the entire community. You stand there, feeling the fine desert dust enter your lungs, while the priest prepares the clay vessel. You know that, from this moment on, regardless of the outcome, the process has already begun. The walk to the altar is the beginning of a procedure where your only possible position is to await what the ritual will reveal. The courtyard of the tabernacle is thick with a heavy silence. You feel the eyes of hundreds of people fixed on you. They are your neighbors, the women with whom you used to fetch water from the well, the elders who watched you grow up. They are there because the ritual was a public act conducted before the community as part of their legal and religious function. The priest approaches, and the sound of his sandals on the beaten earth echoes in the space. He doesn't ask permission. He doesn't explain step by step. According to verse 18 of chapter 5 of Numbers, he simply places you before the Lord. At that moment, the priest's hand reaches her head. With a movement foreseen and described in the scriptures, he unties the knot of her veil and releases her hair. In the culture of the ancient Near East, a married woman's tied-up hair was associated with her status as a wife and the protection of her honor within the community. By releasing it in public as part of the ritual, the priest is performing a liturgical step that within the system of Numbers 5 formally signals that the woman is being subjected to the examination of divine law. She is placed before God without a veil as a symbol of total openness to judgment. The desert wind blows, throwing her hair in her face, and you realize that each gesture of the priest is calculated within a liturgy that exists to make visible to the collective what would happen in the invisible. The priest places the barley offering, the offering of jealousy, on his open palms. It is a grain without the elements that accompany the offerings of honor, without the gleam of olive oil, without the fragrance of incense. According to the biblical text itself, the absence of these elements is not accidental. It is intentional and laden with meaning within the ritual system. You hold that handful of grains while your hair flies in the wind, and the sensation of contrast is brutal. On one side, the sacred architecture of the tabernacle, with its curtains of fine linen and its gold ornaments. On the other, you, positioned before the altar with the simplest elements of the earth. The ritual's function at this stage is to set the stage for what is to come. The priest looks into their eyes with the sobriety of one conducting a sacred procedure and begins to prepare the final elements for the oath. He represents the religious authority of the camp and acts within the limits of what the law establishes. The entire courtyard awaits his every move. No one comes to his defense because, within the logic of the Israelite tribal system, the ritual is precisely the available defense mechanism. It is God himself who will judge the matter. Any human intervention before the verdict would be an interference in the process. You stand there, holding the offering of your own judgment, feeling the weight of the moment, while the priest crouches to gather the next ingredient of the procedure, the dust from the sacred ground. The ritual advances to its densest phase, the one that will make the judgment not only spiritual, but physical. The priest steps away from you for a moment and walks toward the center of the tabernacle. The silence in the courtyard is so complete that you can hear the rustling of his linen garments against his legs. He crouches down. With one hand, he touches the beaten earth floor of the sacred tent, the place where, according to Israelite tradition, the very glory of God rests among his people. He gathers a handful of dust. To anyone outside the context of the ritual, it would be just dirt. But there, within the liturgical structure of Numbers 5, that dust carries a specific weight. It comes from the most sacred place recognized by the Israelite religious system. He stands up, walks back, and places the dirt into a clay vessel filled with holy water. You watch the grains of sand slowly sink, clouding the liquid that, in moments, will be inside you. The procedure doesn't stop at the dust. The priest takes a parchment. On it, with ink, he writes the curses that the scriptures reserve for the case of guilt. Bellies that swell and thighs that wither. Words that describe physical destruction as a consequence of transgression. He writes the formulas of condemnation exactly as the law dictates. Then, before his eyes, he does what the text of Numbers 5 prescribes. He plunges the parchment into the clay vessel. He washes the writing in the water. He rubs the leather until the ink comes off and mixes with the dust. That water, combined with the earth of the sacred place and the written words of the law, becomes what the scriptures call bitter waters that bring a curse. You look at the vessel and understand the logic of the act within the system. You will not merely drink water. You will physically ingest the elements of judgment. The words of the law are now part of the composition of that liquid. If you close your eyes, you can imagine what that system claimed would happen. The law entering your body and finding or not finding, the guilt being investigated. The bitter water receives this name not only for the taste of the ink and the earth, but for the theological weight of swallowing the very words of the covenant. The rustic, cold clay vessel is placed before your face. The smell is metallic, earthy. The system was designed so that the outcome would be determined by divine action within the body. According to the Israelite faith of the time, it was God who would react or not react to what was inside you. You feel your stomach clench even before your lips touch the vessel. The priest holds the vessel firmly, waiting for you to accept the liquid that the law has prepared to decide your fate. Your destiny is no longer in the hands of your husband or the elders. It is about to be handed over to an authority that, within the worldview of that people, transcended any human court. The law stated that the dust came from the sacred ground to reveal the truth. This water, according to the system that created it, served to bring to the surface what was hidden, be it guilt or innocence. The clay vessel is now just inches from your face, but the ritual requires one last step before its conclusion. The priest does not allow you to drink immediately. According to the scriptures in Numbers 5, he must pronounce the oath of adjuration, a legal and spiritual formula that precisely defines what is at stake. He looks intently into your eyes and describes the mechanism that the ritual claims will be activated within your very being. His voice echoes in the courtyard of the tabernacle, solemn and precise, detailing that if you have strayed into impurity, that water will become an agent of physical judgment visible to all. He describes the phenomenon that the scriptures foretell, the swelling of the belly and the wasting of the thigh, transforming the woman's body into a public sign of the divine verdict. The ritual is presented by the text as a supernatural examination in which God himself intervenes directly in the woman's body to reveal the truth where no witness exists. And then, the system demands your confirmation. The priest stops speaking, and the silence becomes absolute. The law requires you to validate the procedure with your own voice. With a dry throat, feeling the weight of the moment, you pronounce the words that the scriptures record, Amen, Amen. By saying that double Amen, you are formally accepting the terms of the system. It is the moment when the matter moves from the sphere of human conflict to the sphere of divine judgment. Your husband watches from a few meters away, awaiting the answer the ritual will give to his spirit of jealousy. For the social and religious structure of the time, this consent was what formalized the procedure and guaranteed the validity of its result before the entire community. The priest brings the vessel closer. You bow your head and the liquid touches your lips. The taste is a dense mixture. The roughness of the dust from the tabernacle floor and the metallic taste of the parchment ink dissolved within. You swallow. The water goes down your throat and, in that instant, time seems to stand still for everyone present. The biblical text says that the water will become bitter, acting as a revealer of purity or guilt within you. The courtyard of the tabernacle awaits the verdict that, according to the faith of that people, God himself would deliver through the body. The outcome of the Sotah ritual is one of the cornerstones of Mosaic law for resolving domestic disputes where no human evidence was available. If, in the following days, your body did not exhibit the reactions described in the curse, if your womb remained normal and your constitution firm, you were declared clean. The text of Numbers 5 states that, in this case, you would be free and retain your ability to conceive children. The ritual ended there. The priest put away the instruments, and the community resumed its routine. The law considered the matter closed by divine judgment. The practical reality that followed was a return to daily life. You returned to the same tent and the same social circle. According to verse 31, the man who initiated the ritual was considered free from guilt by law, regardless of the outcome, because he acted within the right that the spirit of jealousy granted him according to the scriptures. The system prioritized the definitive resolution of the conflict. If the water revealed nothing, the suspicion should be ended, and family life should be resumed under the verdict of innocence given by the tabernacle. The values reflected in this custom are those of Israelite society during that period: the preservation of lineage, the sanctity of the camp, and the identity of the people as a nation set apart for God. The ritual did not merely seek to resolve a domestic conflict. It was a public and theological declaration that the purity of the collective depended on the integrity of each family. For the woman declared pure, the ritual represented her official seal of integrity before the entire nation, a verdict issued by the highest authority that society recognized. She returned to her routine, carrying proof that the matter had been resolved by God Himself within the terms established by the law. The ritual of bitter water was, within the logic of the legal and religious system of the time, the mechanism that the Old Testament offered for the hidden to come to light, or for peace to return to a home where distrust had taken hold. In a theocracy of the second millennium BC, where holiness was the structuring rule of collective life, the body was the tribunal, and God was the judge. The bitter water was the instrument by which this judgment became possible where no human resource existed. In the end, it represented the endpoint in a crisis of trust, the price the system demanded to restore order in a world where holiness was the absolute law and the invisible revealed itself through the visible. If the dust came from the most sacred place on earth and the water contained the words of the law itself, what weighed more on the mind of the drinker? The fear of divine judgment, or the hope that the ritual would finally end the doubt and restore peace to their destiny?